Okay, we're up to Yud Beis Amid Aleph in our trek through Masechta Shekalim, Yerushalmi Shekalim. Here we are, Erev Shvi Shel Pesach in Shnas Tavshin Pei Aleph. Says the Mishnah, Hamagdish Nechasav, a person goes ahead and he makes his Nechasim Kodesh. He says, all my possessions are Kodesh. V'hoyu behem, and among them, Devarim, there were things that Ru'uyim L'Karbanas at Tzibor. Among them, there are things that are to be brought as a carbon tzibor. I'm discussing over here, according to the Yerushalmi, is Ketairis. According to the Babli, it's other ingredients that you could make the Ketairis. Here, we're speaking about a person who has in his possession Ketairis. Obviously, he's an Umid, and he has in his possession, and now he's Magdish them. So what do you do? What do you do with this Ketairis? That's now that he's been Kodesh. Yinasnu le'umanim b'scharon. You would give the umanim the Ketairis directly. This is opposed to the previous Mishnah, where in order to give it to them, first you had to go ahead and take off the Kedusha, transfer it. Over here, we're going ahead and giving it directly, which is, how do you explain that? Something Kodesh, l'chayr is a milah if you're paying guys with something that's Kodesh. So this is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who holds that the Kedusha of the Ketairis is mischalel on the malacha, on the action work that the person did to go ahead and make it. So the Kedusha is mischalel on that. Thus, no need to go ahead and do that. And now, the Rebbe Akiva. So and then what would you do? You go back. You would pay him with it. You would pay him with that, and then you would redeem it with the Tikkun Chadatin, with the new shkalim, and you'd be able to use it for that year. Amalei ben Azai, Einahi Amida. Says Ben Azai, 1 second, to Rabbi Akiva. This isn't consistent with the previous Mishnah. In the previous Mishnah, by where you had Ma'aser Ketairis, you had leftover Ketairis, you had to first go ahead and take off the Kedusha before you gave it to the Umin. Over here, you're giving it to the Umin directly. Ella, what do? Says Ben Azai, the exact same thing as you do in the previous Mishnah, where you had extra Ketairis. The extra 11 we said. Mafrisha mehen, you separate from the nechasim some object, schara umnin, that will be used for the schar of the umnin. They take the ketairis and you mechal on that, on the money of the umnin. And then you give the ketairis swad as a payment. And you go back and buy it. In other words, the exact same thing that we did by the Ma'aser Ketairis yesterday, we do when it comes to a person who's magdish, an artisan that's magdish is Ketairis. And then you buy Mitshuma Salishka. That's the first din of the Mishnah. Second din of the Mishnah, Hamagnish Nechasav, V'hoyisabehen behema ru'uya legabe mizbeach. Now, Stamazoi, when a person's magdish Nechasav, he's magdish lebedek abayis. In other words, he's saying this thing should be used for the temple's upkeep. It should be used for the bedek abayis. You're not thinking lemizbeach, you're thinking lebedek abayis. However, there's a halacha that states that any animal that's royal mizbeach, even if you magdish it with kedushas bedek abayis, it has to end up on the mizbeach. You can't downgrade on a possible upgrade. Something that's called for a higher calling, you can't downgrade. So what do? He's magdish it stam. It means magdish lebedek abayis, and among them you have behemoths that possibly could be used for karbanas. Zecharim and nekevos, you have male animals and females. Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion, Zecharim yimachru litzarchei oilais. The male animals, you sell them to people who need oilais. Unekevos, that you cannot bring as an oila, yimachru litzarchei zivchei shlamim. You sell to people who need shlamim. Udemehem, and their value, their work and their money, yiplu mshar nechasim lebedek abayis. It goes to lebedek abayis. In other words, says Rabbi Eliezer, everything when you're magdish something goes to lebedek abayis. That's the halacha. Everything goes to lebedek abayis. Why am I handling with these animals to sell them for karbanis? Because as we stated, anything that can be upgraded, we won't downgrade. So the oilers, we go ahead and sell for people who need oilers. And the shlamim, we sell for people who need shlamim. But the money that you get from them, they don't have kedushas haguf. They don't have intrinsic kedusha. They have kedushas damim, the bedek abayis. They go to bedek abayis. That's Rabbi Eliezer as a shita. Good, very good. To contrast that shita, we have the shita of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua, no. If a person's magdish, I'm giving you outside beforehand. If a person's magdish, his nechasim, and he has among his nechasim animals, he kind of divides his intention. The animals that were kodesh, that could be kodesh, no, the other way. The non-animals, zicha go lebedek habayis. That's what he means. But what he meant also is if I have an animal that's royal in mizbeach, it itself will go on the mizbeach if possible, as an oila. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it's all lebedek habayis. Since we can't go ahead and downgrade an animal, we'll sell it for the purpose of an oila. According to Rabbi Yeshua, he means to be magdish the animal itself as an oila, not lebedek habayis. There's no middle step of selling. No. Says Rabbi Yeshua, it's a chorim atzmon yikruvu oilos. So chorim themselves, you go ahead and bring as carbon oilos. You don't sell them for people who need them. They themselves are karbanos. That's what he meant when he was magdish them. Unekevois, in the cave you can't bring as an oila. You sell to people who need shlamim. Now, Rabbi Eliezer said that money goes to Bedek Habayis? No. Says Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, and the value you get for that, you bring us a carbon oila. So the big machloikus is, how do you view the animals of this estate that have been magdish? Like Rabbi Eliezer, we view them as kachei Bedek Habayis. But since we have an halacha that's anything's royal in mizbeach, we won't downgrade. We have to bring them to mizbeach, but their value, once sold, will go to Bedek Habayis. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, they were never kodesh lebedek habayis. Only the other nechasim is kodesh lebedek habayis. The animals themselves were kodesh as kedushas oila. I have an akeva, sell it for shlamim, then take that money and buy an oila. That's the machlokes between the two. Rabbi Ushar nechasim yivgu lebedek habayis. Rabbi Akiva oimer, roya ani estiv Rabbi Eliezer midiv Rabbi Yeshua. I see the words of Rabbi Eliezer more clearly than the words of Rabbi Yeshua. Why? Rabbi Eliezer hishves midasai. Rabbi Eliezer was consistent. When he said he's magdish is nechasim, it all goes to one spot. It all goes to Bedek Habayis. The animal, that was the side point. I can't downgrade and upgrade. But Memela, the money I get for it is going to go to Bedek Habayis. So Rabbi Akiva saw Rabbi Eliezer as being a kav of Yashar, without splitting hairs. One kedusha. Rabbi Yeshua chalak. Rabbi Yeshua, he divides it. Rabbi Yeshua is saying you made two kedushas when you say you magdish nechasim. You mean two separate kedushas. You mean Bedek Habayis and you mean kedushas mizbeach. Says Rabbi Akiva, I don't see that. Says Rabbi Akiva, I don't see that. So Amar Rav Pius says Rav Pius. Shemati k'divrei shneim. I hear both sides. How does he hear both sides? Shehamagdish beferish. If a person says, my animals and my nechasim should go to hegdish, k'divrei Rabbi Eliezer, and then they both get lebedek habayis. V'hamagdish stam. Person says they're kodesh, then k'divrei Rabbi Yeshua. Then when he says the word kodesh stam, it'll go in the direction whatever it's ready to go to the rest of the nechasim lebedek habayis. And to the animals, it will go as kedushas mizbeach. So we have machlokes comes out. We saw so far today. We had a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai. What he happens to do if you magdish in the chosim and you have ketaris among them, whereas Rabbi Akiva was machadish that the malacha, the kedusha of the ketaris is chal on the malacha. You don't have to be paid it beforehand. And Rabbi Ben Azai disagreed. He said it's no different than extra ketaris. And now we have machlokes between Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Yeshua vis-a-vis a person who's magdish is nechasim. Vis-a-vis the animals that are found in Magdish Chasim. Everyone, Rabbi Eliezer holds you're going to sell the males for oilos, you're going to sell the females for the shlamim, and the money you get will go to the Bedek Habayis, because the whole thing is the Bedek Habayis. Rabbi Yeshua, on the other hand, says no, we're going to divide it up his meaning of kedusha. The animals that are roilim mizbeach, he means to be magdish them, not the Bedek Habayis. He means to be magdish them for the mizbeach, and therefore they're going to be used the animal as an oila. The male is an oila, the female to be sold and then used as an oila, the value, the money. That's the machlokes between the two. Rabbi Akiva agreed with Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Pius made a pshara depending on what lashon he used. A third halacha, hamagdish nechasim If you magdish in chosim for hoye ben devorim ruuyin al gabim mizbeach, and you have things that are roilim gam mizbeach, not animals. So, for example, yeinois that can be bought as nesachim, shmonim that can be bought part of a mincha or nesachim, for oifos that can be bought as an oilas oif. Rabbi Loza says, not in the Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Loza, this is Rabbi. We have Rabbi Eliezer over here. Funny, in Mishnayos I have Rabbi Loza. In the Gemara it says Rabbi Eliezer, but this is not Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanis. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua. It should be a Loza, not Eliezer. A Loza ben Shamua. This is not the previous opinion. He says Yimachru l'tzorchei oisei hamin. You sell it for what it's needed for. Yimachru l'tzorchei oisei hamin. For people who need wine, people who need shmonim, right? Oifas carbon, you sell it. The oven the mayim oilos, and then you're going to bring oilos. You're going to bring them oilos. You're not going to bring lebedek habayis. You're going to bring oilos. Ushar nechasim you lebedek habayis. Okay, Bez Hashem, we'll see this. The more we'll see this, Bez Hashem. But right now, let's see what we have. So the first din was the din of the first din was the din of the ketayris. Amagdish lekarbanet tzibur, Rabbi Yochanan amak ketayris. And it says you magdish in the chosim, and you have among the chosim something that's roi. What are we speaking about? We're speaking about ketayris. Amar Rabbi Hashaya tipaser, right? How does a person have in his possession ketayris? It must be b'umin mishel beis avtinas. It must be the artisan of the beis avtinas who were the experts in making ketayris. Shayinoitel b'schari ketayris, who took in his schar ketayris. In other words, he got paid for it through ketayris. He had it in his possession, and then he's magdish it. In other words, the Gemara is finding what's the heiketimts of a person having ketayris in his possession. So it makes sense. As we spoke out yesterday, you can pay a person. These people got paid with ketayris. So he had in his possession ketayris. Now he's magdish it. Matam de Ben Azai. Ben Azai said he disagreed with Rabbi Akiva, and he said first you have to mechal it. You can't go ahead and give it directly. And we spoke out the machlokes. Rabbi Akiva holds that the ketayris kedusha can be mechal on the act of malacha. And Ben Azai can't. There you go. The hegdish can't be meschal and malacha directly. Thus, the need to be paida the kedusha before you go ahead and use it. Ela alamois. Tomentanim, we learned over there in Masechta Tamura. Now there, it's going in and contrasting the halachas, the difference between kedushas bedek habayis and kedushas mizbeach, right? Kedushas aguf, kedushas domen. Difference, contrasting now. Yesh b'kodshe bedek habayis. There are din b'kodshe bedek habayis that don't exist with kodshe mizbeach, guys. That's what as I'm filling you in. Yesh b'kodshe bedek habayis. There are halachas that exist with kodshe bedek habayis that do not exist with kodshe mizbeach. What are those? Stam hegdeshos, stam hegdish lebedek habayis. When a person goes ahead and zmagdish something, stam azoi, he means lebedek habayis. Hamakish nechasav lebedek habayis. Now that apparently, guys, would be consistent with the shita of Rabbi Eliezer, who said in our Mishnah everything goes lebedek habayis. Correct? Even the animals which you upgrade, you have to sell, the money goes to Bedek Habayis. So this Mishnah in Tamura would be in conjunction with Rabbi Eliezer and not Rabbi Yeshua, who makes the division between Kedusha Mizbeach directly when you said Kaddish. So as the Gemara fears voice. The Yesh Bedek Habayis, Stomach Desh, the Bedek Habayis, which is mashma like Rabbi Eliezer. Hegdish Bedek Habayis, Chal ala kol. Hegdish bedek habayis is chal on everything. The Gemara there says even sawdust. If you're making saw of hegdish, you're sawing boards of hegdish, kairos of hegdish, the sawdust would be kaidish. Umoilim begedulen. There's a din of meila in the gedulen, meaning if you have kachi bedek habayis, an animal, a chicken who has eggs, or a sheep that has wool, kachi bedek habayis, there'd be a din meila if you go ahead and use the wool and eggs. Masha'enkin kashem is beach, there would not be a din of meila in that. The aim behem aniyah lekahanim. Kahanim can't have enough in bedek habayis. Kachim is beach. They get a piece of the basar. They get if the oila, they get a piece of the skin, the or. They get to use the leather. So in kachim is beach, they do have a piece of the action. Kachim bedek habayis, they can't have another the same as a zar, as a non-kayin. So Rabbi Chanina, the Rebbe, there's my name. The Rebbe Eliezer. This is not Lazer. This is Lazer. Eliezer. That's where probably the name Lezer comes from. Again, in Yerushalmi, they dropped the aleph a lot. I told you, like Mar is Amar, and Elazar is Elazar, and here's Eliezer is Eliezer. So Amar Rebbe Chananya, the Rebbe Eliezer. That's Rebbe Eliezer. Tanina Hamagdin Chasav v'Hoyse ben Behemer Ru'uyal Gam Mizbeach. Zacharim Nekevus Rebbe Eliezer Oimer. Zacharim Yemachel Tzarchi Oilis and Nekevus Yemachel Tzarchi Tzivchei Shlamim. And here's the key. So you see that Stam Hegdish is the Bedek Habayis. So the Mishnah in Tamura, as shown from the Mishnah here in Shekalim, is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer and not what? And not Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yochanan, Tamar the Rebbe Eliezer. What's the reason Rebbe Eliezer that Stam goes to the Bedek Habayis? It says, Ish ki yagdish basically kodesh. There's two psukim in Parshas of I think Bahar. Ish ki yagdish basically kodesh. La Hashem, b'ma anu kaimin. This pasuk. If a person's magdish's house, kodesh Hashem. In bebeis tira, if you're speaking that he's magdish's house, the next pasuk says kvar ksiv, b'ma magdish yigoles beisoy. And if you see that magdish is beisoy, that's speaking about a person's goyel the house that he was magdish. So there, that second pasuk that is speaking about a person's magdish's house. So what's the first pasuk speaking about? Elkia anon kaimin. What are we speaking about? The first magdish nechasav. And it says, "V'ish ki yagdish," is basically meaning a person who's magdish all his property, kodesh laHashem. It should be kodesh laHashem, and mikan stam kodesh to Bedek Habayis. That's Rebbe Eliezer Shita. Stam, a person's a magdish. Where does it go? It goes to Bedek Habayis. Okay, now we're gonna have machlokes between Rav Zeira and between Rav Ba and Rav Shita as to where the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua is. We're gonna have guys a three-year machlokes between Rav Zeira, Rav Ba in Rav, and Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, let's see. Omar Rav Zeira, Rav Chuna b'shem Rav, b'ma pligin Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer, b'magdish nechasav, where you magdish your property. Avol b'magdish edroi, if you magdish your herd, kol ama moida, kuli alma is moida, even Rabbi Eliezer would be moida. If you go ahead and you stay, in other words, I'm saying stam hegdish. I'm magdish my house. Now I'm magdish my property. There's the machlokes. But let's say I go to my herd and say I'm magdish my herd. Even Rebbe Eliezer will be moida, even though you didn't say lemizbeach and you said it's stam, the same lashon of kedusha. The fact that they all royal lemizbeach. We're not going to use the upgrade rule. They are kedushas lemizbeach directly. You don't have to send them. That's Rebbe Zeira's pshat. They're all kodesh kedusha directly, and you have to go ahead and you have to go ahead and you don't have to sell them the kodesh. Rav Ba Rav Chuna b'shem Rav ma pligi b'magdish edroi aval magdish nechasav kol. He says the opposite. He says the machlokes is when you magdish your herd. But if you magdish your house, even Rabbi Yeshua would say, if you magdish your house with everything and you have animals, those animals also be kodesh lebedek habayis. So we want to go ahead and qualify the machlokes between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Zeira says the machlokes is where? In the house, your property. But an edroi, no, everyone would say it's kodesh lamizbeach, even Rabbi Eliezer. And now Rav Ba in the name of Rav says, no, the machlokes is when in the herd. That's when the machlokes is, where Rabbi Yeshua says it's the mizbeach and Rabbi Eliezer says it's bedek habayis. But if you're magdish in the chasim stamazoi and you find animals in the house, even Rabbi Yeshua would be moida that they are what? Kodesh lebedek habayis. Al daite Rabbi Zeira, according to Rabbi Zeira, who said again the machlokes is what? By the house. Nicha, Mishnah makes sense. V'kosha al the Rebba, right? Mizbehema loy mizbeach. Says Rabbi that the machlokes is by the mizbeach, by a herd. Says Rabbi the machlokes is by the herd. That's what he said. The machlokes is by the herd. Question: a person goes to his herd and says it's magdish stam. You're going to say it's lebedek habayis? In Sfara, it makes more sense, like Reb Zeira said. That everyone agrees by the herd. Even Rebbe Eliezer would agree by the herd, correct? So and for the Gemara, the Heim Mizbeachi, right? Mizbeach, Mehem Isron Mizbeach. So I if Mehem is the Mizbeach, V'loma Sosam Isha Zeh, why do you say Stam? In other words, by him saying Hamagdish the animals without adding Le Mizbeach, therefore what? By using that Lashon, he was saying Stam, he wants it Le Bedek Habayis. That would explain, according to Rabbi, the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, why he would argue by a herd that it doesn't go to Mizbeach directly because of the Lashon that he used. A third shita, Rabbi Yochanan, meaning there's no difference. There's no difference between whether you magdish a herd or you magdish a house. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer are going to disagree. Rabbi Yeshua doesn't disagree, right? He magdish a chosav, he magdish etroy, he machloikis, they machloikis. Okay, so let's go over three machloikis. Two things: house, herd. Like Rabbi Sira, the machloikis is what? By house, but by herd they all agree that it goes Lashem. It goes the Mizbeach. Rav Ba, the machloikis is by herd. Via Rabbi Eliezer says Bedek Habayis, and Rabbi Yeshua says Mizbeach. House, even Rabbi Yeshua will be Maida. Rabbi Yochanan, they argue across the board. Whether it's house, whether it's herd, they're arguing. That Rabbi Eliezer says Bedek Habayis, and Rabbi Yeshua says La Mizbeach. Rav Huna b'shem Rabbi b'shem Rav, Rabbi Avohu b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, and Rav Avohu in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Kodshe Bedek Habayis, Shepodin Tamimim, Kodshe Bedek Habayis. They didn't have, again, in order to be poida an animal that has kedushas aguf, you have to wait till it gets a mum. Anything that has kedushas aguf, you have to wait till it gets a mum. That was a kasha yesterday. We said, how could you go ahead and be magdish the birdsim, right? They were never, how could you go ahead if they were how can you be poida them if they were in the klishares? How can you be poida them? So we answered Leiv Bezdin Masna Leim from the beginning of the year. Bezdin made a tanai that you could do it. So you see that something that's kedushas haguf, you can't be poida unless what? There's a mum. What about something that is a bedek habayis? Bedek habayis. In other words, you have an animal that's kodesh bedek habayis, shepodon tmimim, that you're poida when they're tamim, right? Then yotzel lechulin. They go out lechulin completely. They go out completely lechulin. And you know, nafkamina would be, guys, you would be able to use their wool, you would be able to use their milk. If you're psulei mikdashim, if you have a korban that you got a mum was paida, you can't use their milk, you can't work them, you can't use their milk, you can't use their wool. Over here, the tmimim, you paida them tamim, and right away you could go ahead and use their produce that they produce, no problem. Now, Masnisan, the Mishnah, this Mishnah is speaking about Kachim, that Kodim Mum Kavul Hekdeshan. In other words, you were Magdashim Mizbeach, but it was about Mum. So there's two ways it could be. You were Magdash it before it got a Mum, or you Magdash it after it got a Mum. So here we're speaking, you were Magdash it after it got a Mum. So Masnisan Omer came. The Mishnah says similar to Rabbi Yochanan.
So, yeah, the front door is there though. But this is the garage.
Uh-huh. Can you hear me now? You can hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now you have these animals. You mag them as a korban, but they had a mum. So since they had a mum, they can't get kedushas haguf. All they have is kedushas tamim. Similar to kachim mizbeach, kachim bedek habayis, which also only has kedushas tamim. Said Rabbi Yochanan, if I'm poida, my kachim is bedek habayis tamim, I could use the produce. Hu hadin, says the Mishnah, and Mishnah is a Tanoic statement, if the mum came before the kodesh, I could use the produce. Why? Because it also only had kedushas tamim. Right? Kain v'lodan v'chalavan muto la'acha pidyoinam. Once you poida, so therefore l'chayr you have a riot to Rabbi Yochanan that once you poida something that was only had kedushas damim, you could go ahead and use the produce. Amid base. Reb Chizkiah says you have no raya from the Mishnah. because that Mishnah could be speaking b'shem Rav Chisda tipoter shepodon tmimim shehumamu. Your poida hegdeshes that were tamim, and then they got a mum, and since they had a mum, they only had on them kedushas damim, and therefore the vlad in the chalav is mutter, which is shver. This is shver. Right now, this is shver. So maybe you have no raya. You have no raya. Listen well. You have no raya. Why? Because it could be speaking over there that this thing once upon a time had kedushas aguf, as opposed to bedek habayis, which never had kedushas aguf. What's your question, Harold?
What would Rabbi Shua hold in a case like this? Because he doesn't go.
No difference.
No difference.
No difference. Rabbi Yossi b'shem Reb Chisda Masni. Rabbi Yossi in the name of Chisda learned Amru Kain V'lodon v'chaleven asal achepid yonai. It's speaking stam by Psuli HaMikdashim. It's speaking stam by Psuli HaMikdashim. See, this is where it doesn't flow. The Gemara doesn't have a flow to it, right? Rabbi Yossi b'shem Reb Chisda Masni Amru Kain Uvlodon v'chalaven asar of kachim is be'ach de asa. So we make a diak. In other words, guys, we're being medayik not from the din directly, but from the inverse. If it had kachim is be'ach and you applied it, it doesn't work. Mashma, if it didn't have kachim is be'ach and you applied it, it would work. Amar came v'lodon v'chalaven asa la'achip pinyoinai. Okay, so he just brings a raya from the ratio to the safe. Rav Chizkiya b'shem Reb Yossi kachi bedek habayis shepodin tamimim kachi bedek habayis that you pointed tamimim yotzel lechulin like Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Ain't tema la yotzel lechulin. If you don't say they go lechulin, heich kachi mizbeach chol kedushay bedek habayis. If you don't say that the ain't tema, if you don't say la yotzel lechulin. If you don't say what, if you don't say that they go to chulin, how is it possible? Heich kachim is beach chulin al kache bedek habayis. The Mishnah says that you machul tzarchei oilas, that you sell them for the need of oilas. So 1 second. If it's chal. What's 1 second? Let me get my train of thoughts. Where are you? Where's everybody? Okay, let's go back to that Mishnah. Why did we say, guys? Why did we say? We wanted to say that you have cut shape. You Rabbi Eliezer, like Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yochanan said, you go ahead. You have cut shape bedek habayis. The guy's magdish bedek habayis. You can go ahead, be poy to them. And then you're going to use them for kachim mizbeach. If it's kachim bedek habayis, you can't have kachim mizbeach chal on the kachim bedek habayis. It must be a step in between where it becomes chulin. So it's kachim bedek habayis, your poida, and now it's chulin. Thus, it allows the kachim mizbeach to be chal on it. So we can bring a raya from Rabbi Eliezer to Rabbi Yochanan's din. Rabbi Eliezer l'chayru said that something has kedushas bedek habayis, it ends up being kachim mizbeach. How does that work? It must be because there's a step in between where it becomes chulin, because you can't be magdish bedek habayis to mizbeach. You could be magdish chulin to mizbeach. You can magdish chulin bedek habayis, but not from one to the other. So therefore, says the Gemara, we have the following: Rabbi Yossi b'shem Reb Chisda Masni, 2 lines down. Amra Kain, like Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, that's the next one. Like Rabbi Yochanan, because ain't tamar lo yatzal chulin. If you're going to say you don't go to chulin, heich kachim mizbeach chala kachim bedek habayis. How's it possible for kachim mizbeach to be chal and kachim bedek habayis? And it must be they went lechulin, and therefore the kachim mizbeach could be chal on it. Says Gemara, you have no raya. Bali mumim kachim mizbeach chal aleim. You have a balmum. And a balmum is it can be kachim mizbeach could be chal and balmum. So if it can be chal on Baal Mum, l'chayr it can be chal on kachay bedek abayis. So you have no raya of that middle step because the Baal Mum can't. Baal Mum l'chayr should not be able to be chal, yet it is. So just like the kachay mizbeach could be chal on a Baal Mum, so to kachay mizbeach could be chal on bedek abayis. So you don't have that middle step of chulin in there. And now Fred Gemara Leida Milo, which halacha is kachay mizbeach chal on Baal Mum. Ligizo lavoida, to make it asa to go ahead and gaze, and asa to go ahead and do the avoida. To asa and gaze, you other want to do the what? You want to pick it up here? It's almost the almost page. Okay, get some water because it may go down your throat and burn you. Get water, I'm telling you. Those potatoes are hot. Says the Gemara. Hamafish nekeva loylasa. The Gemara gets a little easier. We're gonna have a three-way machlokes, guys. We're gonna have actually two-way machlokes. Hamafish nekeva loylasai ulepischai ulashamai. What's the problem over here? We know that a carbon oila and a pesach and an asham, they're all male carbonis. These are all male carbonis. And over here, you're separating them for what? For a female for them. Oisa tamura. It says you can make a tamura. That means that it has kedushas aguf, guys. Tamura means I'm taking an animal of chulin, placing it next to this animal, saying zu kizu, harizu tamura zu, and that animal then is becoming what? A carbon. So if they didn't become a carbon, it won't be matfis the kedusha of a tamura. Ella the fact that it's like chazil and milsi that it's in a keva machnishois. It's chal on, according to the shita, it's chal on the asham pesach on the keva a kedusha of an oila asham or pesach, even though they can't be bought because it makes it tamura. That's the Tanakama. Reb Shimon Oimer, no, lo'ilasai oisa tamura. For an oila, it makes a tamura. Why? Because you find in the realm of an oila and a keva. Where do you find in the realm of the oila and a keva? By an oila sa'oif, guys. An oila sa'oif, a bird, can be brought from what? From male or female. Ein tamas v'zachrus ba'oif. There's no din of tmimim or males by birds. Only mechusar eva. The only thing, if it's missing a limb, you can't bring it. But by carbon oila, so therefore, since in the realm of the carbon oila, you do find the genre of a female by the fowl, therefore, the Indian behem as well will say that it's chal, the carbon oila, even though it's a female. That can make a tamura. However, if you said this nekeva should be a pesach or an asham, eina oisa tamura, because we don't find a female in the realm of pesach or asham. Reb Shimon Yehuda Aimer Mishum Reb Shimon, he has a different opinion of Reb Shimon. In other words, we have Reb Shimon saying what he says, and we have Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda reporting what Reb Shimon said. So he says, none at all. It doesn't work at all. So three machlokes, guys, look at me. Like the Tanakama, all three work. Oila, Pesach, Asham, despite the fact it's a female. Like the last shita, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Shimon ben Yehuda in Reb Shimon, none of them work. Middle shita, the oila will work, but the Asham, the Pesach won't. Why would the oila work? Because you have in the realm of oila and the keva by oila size. Those are the three shitas. Rabbi Yochanan, time of the Reb Shimon, Shekem Atzinu, as I just told you, nekeva ba'oif k'shera lavayoila. Since you find by a nekeva that an oif it can be bought, it's from Rabbi Yochanan. Time with Reb Shimon ben Yehuda that none of them work. In min b'mina hu chalak alav, chol shkei min b'sheina mina. What does that mean? Outside, there are 5 different ashamas, guys. So asham mitzayra, asham nazir. Then there's gezela meila and shifcha charufa. The first 2, the nazir and the nazir and the mitzayra, is a 1-year-old sheep. The latter 3, asham meilais and shifcha charufa, are a 2-year-old sheep. What happens if we interchange? I bring a nazir from the 2-year-old and I bring a asham from the 1-year-old. Mila, it doesn't work. Says Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, if within the same realm it won't work, even though it's a year apart, certainly a totally different carbon won't work, and therefore oila pesach l'shlamim do not work. So let's see it inside. Okay. Time Rabbi Shimon Yehuda in min b'minay hu chalak alav kol shkein min b'sheina minay. Eza min b'minay shu chalak alav. With you find a distinction that doesn't work. Kehada the Tanya, like that we learn. Asham ben Shana, an Asham that's a 2-year-old, meaning either carbon nazir or mitzayra. The heavy ben shtayim, and you bring the Asham of milas because they like shiv charufa was a 2-year-old, or ben shtayim, the heavy ben shalosh lo yotza. You're not yotza. So therefore, if you're not yotza, therefore what? You can't be yotza, and certainly with a female. Rabbi Shimon Oimer call atzmanein a. Okay, well so that's Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Shimon Yehuda, and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yeshua, Shneim Amud Davar Echad. Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon and Yehuda, and Yeshua, they both say the same thing. Kama Rabbi Yeshua Amar Nekeva LaOila LeKitcha ElHegdish Damim. Just like Rabbi Yeshua says, if you magdish a behema LaOila, you only could kodesh LeDamim. Kain Rabbi Shimon Oimer Nekeva LaOila LeKitcha ElHegdish Damim. Ain't hema kodesh kedushas aguf yirahu, right? So ain't hema kodesh kedushas aguf yirahu. 1 second. Rabbi Shimon Oimer Nekeva LaOila LeKitcha ElHegdish Damim, right? Rabbi Shimon says in the Nekeva LaOila, you're not kodesh ElHegdish Damim. The same as Rabbi Yeshua says the Nekeva LaOila will not be kodesh to kedushas Damim. Now, ain't hema kodesh kedushas aguf yirahu. You don't say if you kodesh kedushas aguf that it should go ahead and be and you have to go ahead and pasture the animal. What does that say? Hang on a second. All right. Because if you're going to say that Rabbi Yeshua holds, right, ain't tema kedushas aguf, you're going to say that Rabbi Shimon says that what? That you have a female. If you're going to say that's kedushas aguf, then the halacha should be yiru. But you don't say he has to be yiru. Why don't you have to graze it? Because it must be because it doesn't have kedushas aguf, it only has kedushas damim. Amar Rabbi says, ain't ani roya estir Reb Shimon Pesach. I don't agree with Reb Shimon Pesach who says that what? That a female can't be used. Why? Shemoisa Pesach b'shlamim. Guys, outside. Why was the carbon oila okay? According to the Tanakh, according to Reb Shimon. Why was it okay? Because you find in the realm of Pesach of oila and the keva. What do you find? The oila soif is in the keva. In the Pesach as well, you possibly can find in the keva. Pesach. What do you do with an extra shlamim, guys? An extra Pesach. It was a shlamim. A shlamim is a female animal, so the male is geshmak. Just like you say by on the keva for an oila, it works because of oila sa'oif, which is in the keva, which could be in the keva. So too by Pesach, Rabbi Shimon said it doesn't work. No, it does work. They would have kedushas aguf. Why within the keva have kedushas aguf? Because you find in the realm of Pesach on the keva. Where do you find that? By shlamim. Ma'aseh Pesach shlamim, and the shlamim can be brought as in the keva. The lema ein ani roya estir Reb Shimon ba'asham. Why don't you say I don't see the words of Reb Shimon by an asham? Why? She'amoisa asham ba'oila. Because you have an extra. In other words, Reb Shimon says only oila doesn't work, but Pesach and asham don't work, right? I can asham also. In other words, as long as I can find a tzad in the keva, it seems to go ahead. And the keva would have kedusha, right? Oila had tzad in the keva machmas oila soif. Psachim had the keva machmas the fact that it becomes a shlamim. An asham, guys, an asham. If it's extra asham, what do you do with it? It becomes an oila. So and then you have an oila, you have in the realm oila soif. So by asham as well, it should be it should work. So Rav Avin im higdish Pesach ba shlamim gufa karav shlamim. Mashchenkin higdish asham ba oila ain't gufa karav oila. By carbon Pesach, the extra Pesach, it itself we bought as a shlamim. Therefore, you have it side of nekeva. Mashenkin the asham, which you're going to have to yiro first graze at stavu, and then it gets a mum, and then poide v'niftu and be poide. Therefore, that's so far removed to be considered in a keva. Therefore, if you say in a keva for an ashram, it doesn't work. Now, my pligi, what's the machloikis between Rebbe and Reb Shimon? That Rebbe holds that it does work for Pesach, but it doesn't work for what? And Reb Shimon says it doesn't work for Pesach. It says Reb Shimon says Hegdish Damim Higdish. When a person's magdish something, he's magdish kedushas damim. And Rebbe says Higdish Gufay magdish. He's magdish Gufay, and therefore it would work. Okay. Rabbi Zira b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Now, going back to the Mishnah, Rabbi Shua said that if you went ahead, you magdish all your nechasim, that the animals automatically become oilais. What was the mechanism for that happening? What was the mechanism for that happening? How did they all of a sudden become oilais? That your magdish, so you're saying the animals have nechasim, the animals become oilais because they have kedushas aguf, and the rest of the nechasim better kabayas. How does that work? It says Rabbi Zira b'shem Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Taimad Rabbi Shua, Daber el Aroin vel Bonov, vel Kol b'nei Yisrael, v'mata aleim ish mi beis Yisrael, any person from the house of Yisrael, asher yakrav la'Hashem la'oila, that's makrav la'Hashem, meaning brings a neder la'Hashem la'oila, hakol karev la'oila, right? Everything is brought as an oila. L'tzoinchem tamim zachar, l'tzoinchem tamim zachar, minayin I feel in the kavis, that even if you haven't heard in the kavis, they're brought as a oila, you sell them. It says babakol, the Rabbi says in the kavis. So this is a very modern halacha. You're telling me zacha bakar and you be marber in the keva. And that what? That you're going to go ahead, take that in the keva and turn it into an oila by selling it. Rabbi Yitzchak be Rebbe Elazar shal ksiv zacha v'at amit babakol Rabbi says in the kevos utagavasi ksiv tamim v'at amit babakol Rabbi spali momim. Why don't you say that, fellas? By bakar you say the opposite, that and a keva can get kedusha aguf. Why don't we say the opposite of tamim? Zacha tamim means without a mum. So just like baka, you're saying the opposite means female. Zacha means female. Why don't we say tamim means balmum? And balmum also you sell and take that money because it has kedushas aguf. Why don't we say that? My binayu. What's the difference? Says the Gemara. Rav Oma shafta dekatkana b'neihem. There's the stick of a weaver between them. There's a big piece of wood between them to make a chilik between a balmum and between an akeva. The keva, they're roy to mizbeach for another carbon. Here's the chilik. In the keva, you can bring as a shlamim. You can bring a keva as a chatas, meaning it's roy. A balmum is not roy at all. Therefore, babaka zacha, I can darshan perhaps means that kedushas aguf is given to the keva. Mashen came. There's no way in the world I can go ahead and say that the balmum has kedushas aguf. Okay, we'll stop over here. We'll wish everyone a good yontif, good Shabbos, good yontif.